Welcome on into the Wolverine.com podcast. Clayton Safey here with Chris Ballas and Anthony Broom on Friday, January 3rd. Happy New Year. We're one day after we normally record. Had travel yesterday, but we're back in the great state of Michigan. We're going to break down the Wolverines bowl win over Alabama. We'll talk about Michigan's season as a whole, and then Michigan basketball heading into two games out west against USC and UCLA. If you're watching this video on YouTube and you're excited about Michigan's win over Alabama, and if you thought it was maybe even a little bit funny to knock off Alabama without 10 starters, hit that like button, subscribe to our YouTube channel here, and head to thewolverine.com. Use the promo code UM1 for 2 months of premium access for just $1. We're covering the transfer portal, the late signing period, Michigan basketball, recruiting, everything over at thewolverine.com. Get your money's worth there, $1 for 2 months of premium access. And if you want to stick around after that, that would be great as well. Was flying in yesterday. You know, you get the captain says, you know, flight attendants prepare for arrival. And you look outside the window and you see a bunch of white and snow everywhere. I'm like, wait, what's going on, guys? It's I'm a little cold here.
You know what? It was like 3 days earlier. I was standing in the ocean at St. Pete's Beach, and it was amazing. Picking up seashells for the kids and all that, and thinking, man, I could get used to this in the winter. And then I got off the tarmac there in Chicago on catching my flight, which was obviously delayed because they all are these days, and it was so damn cold. And I'm thinking, this sucks, man. I'm gonna be a snowbird someday. But I do love the snow for Christmas. I do love football in the elements, which made Tuesday's game even better when it started pouring rain and you could see the Alabama guys were miserable and the Michigan guys were just slip sliding like Fred Moore and getting into it, man. It was a lot of fun. So, but what a trip. Never expected it. We're getting a lot of crap, guys, for picking against Michigan again for 2 weeks in a row. And it's like, guess what? Just about everybody picked against Michigan. So, but it was fun. What a trip. Enjoyed being there with you guys. Lions got the dub. It's fantastic. So great way to go into the new year. And it sure, as I wrote in my column, it sure felt like it mattered, guys, to those guys when they're on the field, when we were on the sidelines and that Michigan defense was going for another stop to win the game. You could tell that crowd was loud. Everybody was into it. It was a blast.
Yeah, I think the lesson learned from the trip is that I seem to have gleaned that bowl games are only meaningless if you think you don't have a shot to win them.
Right.
And it feels a whole hell of a lot different when you do win them. Go down to breakfast in the hotel on New Year's Day, and you got Alabama beat people sort of just kind of had their head in their hands, eating their oatmeal, and Michigan people come down with the glow on their face. And, felt a lot like, well, it didn't feel like last year. That was something else entirely. But to end the year the way you started it was pretty incredible. And, yeah, I mean, we'll take the crap. We'll eat the crow for it. I mean, they won back-to-back games where I think they were a combined 36-point underdog. Probably, actually, it was probably more than that. Math is hard. That's not why I'm here. Just a remarkable end of the year for them. I think what we've seen is that, there was a point this season, and it was right before that second bye week where it's like, listen, this has to get better. Start demanding better. And I think you saw a team play its most cohesive football possible, right? Like, we know what the offense was. We know how limited they were going to be, and took a lot of turnover luck in that game. Thank God for the rain on New Year's Eve. But yeah, whenever you have a chance to kind of strap on the pads and go out there and win a football game, it's not meaningless at all. We can debate the merits of how meaningful it is, but it's not meaningless. And those guys played like it wasn't meaningless. And just a remarkable defensive effort. And hey, listen, no one's you're gonna look back on the season, see 8-5, and well, there's some memories from it, but the hope moving forward is that you're not playing in a quote unquote meaningless bowl game, that you are playing bigger games. And this college football playoff now, where it looks like it's more winnable than it's ever been to get to a national title. So a lot of good things happened this week. A lot of good things have happened the last month and a half, whatever it is. But good to end the year on a high note. And hey, I'll one last point. I get the snowbird thing now. Been in Florida now twice within the last month. Went down there for the Fort Myers tip off. It's down there for the bowl game. I get it. It's abrupt when you walk out. Walk out to your catch your ride from the airport, and it's 50 degrees cooler than it was where you just were.
Yep. And hey, by the way, Clay, it was Austin Fox who said, it could have been an 8-5 season like 2017. And who did they lose to in 2017? Michigan State, Ohio State. Who else did they lose to in 2017?
South Carolina.
South Carolina. They lost the bowl game. So yeah, I mean, it's a completely different feel. That's another thing I wrote after the game is that not all 8-5 seasons are created equal. If you told me before the year that they were going to beat Alabama, Ohio State, Michigan State, well, Michigan State for sure. But and finish like they did, that's the 8-5 I would have taken for sure.
Yeah, if you would have told me that they were going to beat Ohio State and Alabama in the same year, I would have figured they're probably still playing at this point. But no, you're right. It's kind of a weird season where you lose to Indiana and Illinois. You hardly ever lose to those teams historically, and then you're able to beat Alabama. The only team, according to Brian Bush on the Michigan radio broadcast, the only team ever to beat Alabama twice in one calendar year. You beat Ohio State again. A lot of good, even though there was a lot of not so good at different points, but you end on a high note. And the whole meaningless thing, I mean, a Thursday or Friday walkthrough isn't meaningless. A scrimmage, the whole spring game crowd, I mean, that was not anything. I've been to a bunch of spring games. It has nothing to do with – there's no correlation at all between a spring game and what that was on Tuesday. That was a Michigan football game. Every single Michigan football game is historic. It matters immensely and is extremely important. And Michigan goes out there and gets the win. If they would have lost, I would have said the exact same thing, how important it was, even though they had an uphill battle that they were fighting there without 10 of their starters, a bunch of guys going to the NFL. And as the Dave Fleming said on the ESPN broadcast, it's not just some of the best players on the team. They had some of the best players in the country not playing for Michigan in that game, which makes it all the more impressive. You have the kind of, if you look at this as a boxing match, you have this first round flurry where you land some punches and, maybe some of it was luck. I think the drop snap was, but the interception, Wesley Walker makes a great play. The forced fumble, Amir Hall comes off the corner, on a corner blitz, knocks the ball free. Cameron Brandt is right there, heads up play. I mean, that's good football. You get a fourth down stop before that. You start 3 straight drives in the red zone, 4 in a row to begin the game on the Alabama side of the field. And that's kind of what Michigan needed to do. I mean, to be able to rack up some points early. They get up 16-0 in the first 13 minutes. And then, I know maybe they said they wanted to be aggressive or whatever, but that kind of goes out the window a little bit when you have that lead and you're that limited. And then Davis Warren goes down. I think then, okay, we're going to outlast these guys. We're going to be, to keep, going with the boxing analogy, we're going to be bouncing around the ring, kind of, feeling them out, wasting time, playing great defense, which Michigan did. The only way you can win that way is if you have a great defense. But Michigan found a winning formula with a team that was extremely limited. And you have to give Sherrone Moore credit and Wink Martindale, that defense, so much credit. And, without the guys that we talked about, I mean, no Mason Graham, Kenneth Grant, no Will Johnson, Makari Page, Josiah Stewart on defense. The offense didn't have some of its best players. Your 2 best running backs, your left tackle and your tight end, those are like some of Michigan's best players on a year. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Those are some of the most important positions on a Michigan football team. You didn't have those guys. We'll talk about Jordan Marshall in a little bit, but just the fact that they were able to piece together a formula with all these different ingredients to win this game was really impressive.
It was, and people rip on Davis Warren all the time. He is who he is. They're like, you're way too easy on him. And I say, no, I said they needed to go to the portal. I said that the quarterback play wasn't good enough this year. I'm just not willing to say that he is the only reason that this offense sucks. The offensive line, and it does suck. 190 yards sucks, fellas. I'm sorry. There's no way around it. So, but 190 yards, and you had a couple great throws from Davis Warren too, and I'm willing to say that. Okay, when he had the beautiful the fade to Fred Moore, he had another nice pass to Fred Moore, and everybody's like, "Oh, it was late." No, it wasn't late. Go watch the film. It was a good throw, and you watch the throw to on the run to Hogan Hansen. He made some really nice plays. He was 9 and 12 for 75 yards. Oh, they won't let him throw deep because he doesn't have an arm. He's got fine arm strength. Okay, they don't throw deep and they don't do a lot of throwing because they're a, they don't have great receivers. B, he has a tendency to turn the ball over. So that, and so don't put him in that position. And I agree completely with that. See, your running game was doing okay with Jordan Marshall, and you had the lead, like Clay said. You didn't have to let everything hang out. Uh, the double pass would have worked if had it been a better throw and had it not been pouring rain. I think they probably should have saved that one. Maybe it was scripted, but at that point, I think you save it. And when the rain is pouring down. But to your point about the turnovers, you're absolutely right. Two of those were forced. There was another one that was forced, a fumble that bounced right back to the fat guy's hands, and he runs for another 7-8 yards. Right, that could have been another great turnover. So, and the one was absolute monsoon. Right, that was the gods giving him 3 points or whatever it was, because and basically they would have won the game anyway. But frankly, the defense and Wink Martindale, as our Anthony Broom says, they're the ones that get the flowers here. Wink Martindale, his last 4 games were fantastic, absolutely fantastic. And what Lamar Morgan did with the back end, and what Brian Jean Marie or Jean Marie or whatever you want to call him, if you want to go to the French pronunciation, did with the linebackers as they improved throughout the year was fantastic. And Lou Esposito, what he did with that defensive line all year, especially in this game, though, when you don't have Mason Graham and Kenneth Grant and you're still doing what you did, is outstanding. So credit to that defense. Offense did just enough, but that defense is fun. And at one point, guys, when we were on the field together, we said this is what it's going to look like next year. There were 11 guys out there that were going to be playing next year, and they were having a great time. Love Derek Moore. Love those linebackers. Love what we're going to see from that defense next year, guys. I already can't wait.
Yeah, and I go back to when you and I did that show Monday, and we're just kind of throwing our hands up, going, I don't see it being close. But like, what would it take for it to be a competitive game, or God forbid Michigan pull this off? It went exactly as it needed to go, with those turnovers early on. And thank God for the rain. Don't often say that, but this is a Michigan team now that, we talk about culture, we talk about mentality. Going back to, I feel like the turning point for all this was that Wisconsin game during the 2021 season, where they find a way to make adverse conditions work in their favor or fuel them, whatever it is. And those guys stepped up. They weren't worried about getting wet. They weren't worried about any of those type of things. They made the plays they needed to make with the guys that were going to be out there. It's, again, game threads on our site are a completely different beast. We know that. But it was striking the amount of people who were like stunned that the quarterback play wasn't great. Not stunned, but just still kind of lamenting it, and the play calling and all the personnel. It's like, well, yeah, why do you think they addressed the position the way they did and made the change of coordinator? Just kind of had to get through the rest of this year. I think that, we kind of sift through what things to glean from it. Would you have loved to see Khalil Mullings play one more time? Donovan Edwards? Yeah. But you found maybe your lead back for next year in Jordan Marshall, who we thought very, very highly of anyways. He finally is healthy, gets a shot with the ones, and won the MVP of that bowl game, and had some incredibly tough runs, and was getting his ass beat too, because the protection, the run blocking was not great still. But you look like you have a future star there. Derek Moore, we've talked about him as a guy that it's just kind of a matter of time. The way he plays, those sack numbers for him eventually will come. We saw them with 2 sacks in that game on Tuesday. So, I mean, those are just a couple examples of why, you've already kind of set. I think they've set a pretty good floor in terms of contributors of what they can be. Now, how do you add to it? How do you make this thing better? The offense is going to be better. There's literally almost nowhere to go but up, because they were one of the 5 to 8 worst offenses in all of college football this year. That's going to improve with better play at the quarterback position. Hopefully it improves in terms of adding a couple more guys on the offensive line. But, just in terms of having an incredibly productive transition year, because that's what this was. Did they squander some opportunities? Maybe they're in this 12-team playoff if they find ways to close out the game at Washington, beat a team like Indiana. It's possible. But you've got all these, I don't want to go to Ohio State exactly, but you've got all these fans chirping right now on that side of the rivalry as if they didn't lose that game a month ago, as if they don't still have 2 more games to win in this college football playoff. Michigan can come out of this season with its 8 wins and the transition year and setting itself up for the future with a national championship last year in its back pocket. When we talked to Texas fans after that game in week 2, Michigan fans are, shaking their heads and kind of disgusted with the performance. There are a number of Texas fans that were in Ann Arbor that said we would trade positions with you in a heartbeat. And when you see the way that Sherrone Moore was able to rally the troops late in this season, get a couple of those wins, against Ohio State, Alabama, it does make you wonder, like, he's already won a decent amount of big games here. And the roster, to me, I think is only going to get better. You're going to lose some star power in other spots, but I just think the chemical mixture mixed with sort of these guys now that, again, it's another group that you pass the baton. You've beaten Ohio State. You've beaten Alabama. The only way to continue doing that is to, have these guys that have been there sort of teaching the next generation. And I come out of this week feeling I would have felt encouraged about the future regardless, but even more so after the performance on Tuesday.
You have to feel good about what Wink Martindale is going to continue to give you and really seem to figure out what he needed to do with that group of guys and in the college game. And it took a little bit of time, and it took a little bit of time in general for Michigan to kind of figure out what it was at the beginning of the season. I think maybe they thought they could just kind of plug in new guys and do what they had done. And, hey, whole new defensive staff, but hey, he's been in the NFL and these guys have experience. Let's just, kind of roll out there. And obviously I'm oversimplifying it, but I think they figured out as the year went on, okay, these are our limitations. It's, it takes, maybe it's a hit to your pride a little bit to have to swallow that you do have these limitations, but how can we win regardless? And they figured that out in some huge games. I think there's no question that Sherrone Moore teams are going to get up for big games as well, get up for and not bow to any opponent, no matter what the helmet is on the other side, which is really a good thing going forward for Michigan. They end this year with 5 of their wins, 5 of them all over Power 4 opponents, getting outgained this season. They only hit 300 yards in 5 of 13 games. They were under 275 in 6 games, yet they were able to win some big ones, which is, it's just kind of incredible. The lack of being able to move the ball, score points offensively, but winning field possession, trying to win the clock, control the football and play good special teams, have a great kicker, use all that to your advantage. And you said it, Anthony, but Jordan Marshall, 23 carries, 100 yards. He had the 24-yarder that helped set up the field goal at the end, which Michigan absolutely needed because otherwise Alabama would have been able to kick a game-tying field goal at the end instead of the Jalen Milroe fourth down stop for a second straight season that ends his career now at Alabama. And Jordan Marshall, he forces 12 missed tackles. It's the most by a Michigan player in a game since Blake Corum against Michigan State in 2022. He had 16 in that one. Michigan's run game, 121 of their 129 rushing yards were after contact. A lot of stalemates, as John Jansen said on In the Trenches after the game with the offensive line. But to find those little creases, get those 2-3 yard gains, turn them into some bigger ones late. It's not often that late in the year you get pretty much a debut from a guy. He had 8 carries in his career coming in, and then he goes and does that and kind of carries that offense throughout the game. It was really, really impressive.
Had a feeling, guys. I did. I said we get to see Jordan Marshall, and I can't wait. And as in terms of true, pure running back skills, he might have been the best in the room, guys. And when you look at his ability to break tackles, to make people miss, and his speed, I love Kalel Mullings and what he accomplished at Michigan. And he is, in my opinion, a legend for what he did in that Ohio State game. I know we're throwing that word around loosely a little bit, but Jim Harbaugh kind of changed that, right? Real legends are your Heisman Trophy winners, your Tom Harmons, your Charles Woodsons, guys like that. But that was a legendary performance anyway, and Kalel Mullings was an absolute stud. Obviously, Donovan Edwards had his share of big moments here in big games, but Jordan Marshall, to me, showed that he is more like Blake Corum than these other guys and what he can accomplish in being a true running back, and loved what he did, loved what he said after the game. Clay, when he said, "Hey," he told Bryce Underwood, "We aren't going to be playing in any more ReliaQuest bowls." With all due respect to the ReliaQuest bowl, which treated us great and fed us extremely well. So, but this was a fantastic a performance from him, especially when you look at the numbers from Pro Football Focus and what we saw with our own eyes about those stalemates. I believe that the highest ranked lineman was Andrew Sprague, if I'm not mistaken, in that game via Pro Football Focus. Judging by your article, Clay,
That is correct.
a true freshman starting at right tackle, and I believe that the 190 yards that they had was the lowest of the year total, if I'm not mistaken. It's got to be. I don't remember another game in which I didn't get 200 yards. But
That's
so a
correct as
couple,
well. Yep.
yeah, a couple of things on that. So Kirk Campbell, to me, I know that he got a lot of the heat, and maybe some of it was deserved, but okay, it wasn't just him. It wasn't just Davis Warren. And I don't understand either why people can't give Davis Warren some credit for some of the things, the positive things he does too. No, he's not a great quarterback. No, he shouldn't be the starting quarterback at Michigan right now. I'm sorry, if I'm hurting anybody's feelings. At the same time, he was 9 of 12 for 75 yards and had a couple good throws. So this was a complete team deficiency when you look at the offensive line, when you look at wide receiver, when you look at everything else involved. And what I give Sherrone Moore credit for is understanding after the game. He's like, it was great, but we have to be more explosive on offense. The but came right away. We cannot go through this again. We wasted really a fantastic defense this year, especially down the stretch. And they got better as the year went on. Again, credit to Wink Martindale. And you can't have that again. They've got to be much better next year. The personnel will improve. I think that's part of it. Offensive line is what I'm really looking at, guys, in that wide receiver room. I think the quarterback will be just fine, but those are the two rooms that I've got my eyes on next year.
Oh, without question. I
Yeah.
mean, similarly to how we came into this year saying, "Oh, well, whatever happens at quarterback is the most consequential development of how this season would go." It's the offensive line next year because I think those pieces are in place. Even, again, I could even, and this isn't going to happen. Like they're going to add another wide receiver, maybe two guys. We'll see what happens there. But I could even be talked into the idea that if they didn't make any other additions at wide receiver, I think you're already much better offensively with the quarterback room. I think that the offensive line will benefit from having some younger guys playing, but again, it's just got to be better. I don't know. I don't know if they had 5 good offensive linemen this year. They started their best 5. I don't know how many of those guys will start next year. I really don't. I think that all 5 spots could be and should be up for grabs. That includes, and we know Greg Crippen's coming back at center. We know that, there's a couple additions that they've made and a couple, or at least one addition they've made and hoping on another one or a couple down the road here. But if that offensive line doesn't get sorted out, you'll be better offensively because I think your personnel is going to be a little better. But Michigan has shown that if you want to run the football 40, 50 times, if you want to pass, you get into a game where you have to throw the ball a ton in the past. If you have an offensive line that can kind of dictate the terms, that is going to be what wins you Big Ten title. It's going to be what wins you big games. It's going to be, I think, in this 12-team playoff now, I'm not seeing a lot of great line play. If you get very good line play, I think you can make a run in this thing. So they need to get back to that. And the fact that, the pedigree of the head coach is coaching up offensive lines and coaching offense. There's the expectation that will be much better next year. And it has to be.
Is it fair to say that literally the only thing that we saw from the Michigan offense that, I'll say it for myself, that makes me feel better about next year was Marshall? I mean, you hear about him, he's a top 100 recruit, but to actually see it in a game against Alabama, that's a good defense. Not a great defense, but a very solid, good defense in the SEC. Still Alabama was outstanding to see. Literally nothing else. Maybe Frederick Moore. But other than that, it was like, okay, this offense has a ton of work to do.
Yeah, and it's funny because everybody looks at Fred Moore and they says, "Oh, we got our wide receiver 1 for next year." Well, he's making catches that guys make every game around the country, right? It's not like these were the touchdown grab was a good catch, getting the foot down, right? But and I remember when Roy Roundtree had like a 200 something yard game against Illinois, all these wide open, there were so many defensive busts, and this was several years ago, 10 years ago probably, and oh, he should get the number one jersey and so on and so forth, and I'm like, it doesn't quite work that way, right? There's much more to it than having a couple flashes or one big game and being a complete and a weapon at wide receiver. And I think Fred Moore could be a good number three, a solid number three, right? I don't think he's a number one. And I think they're still looking. Maybe Skylar Bell from UConn, who we're still waiting on, who visited and we've heard good things about. He had a really nice game against North Carolina. To me, he's a number two on the best Michigan receiving cores of the last 20, 30 years, if you go back and look. So, but again, it's also hard, fellas, to sell wide receivers on this offense when they know you want to smash and you're running the ball. Now, they did bring in Bryce Underwood, and they're going to throw a little bit more with Chip Lindsey, but they're still going to be physical. And guys, receivers want to catch the ball flat out. That's, Andrel Anthony went to Oklahoma so he could catch passes. I don't know where he's going now. He's in the transfer portal again. Has he decided where he's going? Duke. Okay, so Duke. But guys, wide receivers want to catch passes. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. I like the Donovan McCulley addition. But to me, there's still a lot to prove, and spring's going to be big, but I do like the Chip Lindsey hire. The more that I hear about him, the more I like about him, but I am in no way, shape, or form ready to blame everything on Kirk Campbell, especially after what we saw, more of the same in the bowl game, even though they didn't have some of their best players.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, their offensive issues this year were systemic. They weren't talented enough. They weren't coordinated well enough. And, the nice thing about the Chip Lindsey hire is that you have a guy now who, going back a decade or so, has a track record of generating more explosives and finding ways to be balanced. And someone who comes from, the Todd Monken tree, someone who comes from the Gus Malzahn tree. So you marry that with what Sherrone Moore likes to do and what Michigan's run, and I'm excited about that. It kind of gives, if Sherrone Moore is going to be sort of more of a CEO type of head coach, to have guys, lean on a guy like Wink Martindale, who again has completely flipped the perception of him from being Don Brown 2.0 to being a guy that kind of put on a couple master classes that defined this late season push. I mean, he gets a lot of credit for that, but to have guys who've been doing it a long time, have that experience, have that background, it kind of gives Sherrone more leeway to do what I think he's pretty good at, which is one, I think, as we're seeing right now, I think they've done a pretty good job recruiting and are doing a good job in the portal. I know fans are mad that they didn't go off on the Toys R Us shopping spree and get the 1, 2, 3, and 4 best wide receivers in the portal and just grab whatever they want, but they are doing a good job. They are bringing in guys that fit. The other thing that Moore, I think, has shown he can do is he can keep a team together. And that culture can stay intact of being, even when they were losing games this year, to be able to play for 4 quarters. You never saw guys, quit on the field. You never saw a game get away from them because the guys weren't interested in being there. From wire to wire, these guys competed and played their tails off. And I think that's the most exciting thing, is that if you can kind of keep that intact while increasing the talent, and then you have these 2 coordinators that, hey, this is your side of the ball. You have a track record of success here. I think the infrastructure here is set up pretty nicely. Now, there are still some operational things in game that I think need to get better. The timeout was, you don't talk about that now because they won. But we've seen stuff in game, like some of the challenges citing that, the team was fighting, so I figured I should fight too. Some learning on the job stuff, which again, we'll see how it improves in the future. But overall, I think you come out of this year pretty darn encouraged by what this can be, especially if they do. I mean, gosh, if you even get into the top 80 offensively with the type of defense they play, you got to feel pretty darn good about where this team is going to be next year.
I want better.
Hey, that'd be a massive step forward.
I want better
in the stat sheet, but yeah, you want a lot better than that. Last thing, and we'll talk about the season as a whole real quick because we touched on a lot of it. But the last thing for me on this game is that I want to give Sherrone more credit for is how he actually did manage it outside of that timeout that I disagreed with before the
both did.
outcome of what happened. All of us did up there. Is actually the way he managed it conservatively, because he was playing to his team strengths. When Dan Campbell goes for every fourth down, that's a weapon for his team. That's the way they play. They have the personnel to do that. Every announcer, when you watch a game and a team goes for it on fourth down, they say, "Oh, he's giving his team a chance, and he's fighting for his guys, and this is what they came out here. They're playing to win." Playing to win for Michigan was kicking a field goal on 4th and 3 from the 12. Playing to win for Michigan in this game was kicking a field goal on 4th and goal from the 3. Kicking the punting as well. They didn't go for any fourth downs in this game. They ran only 2 first down passes in this game. They ran the ball on their last 14 plays in this game. They leaned on their defense and they won. It was almost aggressively conservative, and coaches don't get credit for actually playing like that when they win. People want to see the fourth downs and let it all hang out, and that was letting it all hang out. That's what they have, and that's how he had to manage the game to win. So you have to give him credit for figuring out what exactly he needed to do, especially given his team's limitations.
Part of it was because of the way that the game started, and I think
Yes.
your game plan changes a little bit. You can be more conservative when you're off to a 16-0 lead. You're not. I think they would have run a little more play action and done a few more things with Davis Warren had that been the case. Had they not been up 16-0, they would have had to, I think, to move the ball. But when you're up 16-0, I thought he played it well exactly. And when you've got a kicker like Dominic Zvada, who is the best kicker right now, had the best season in Michigan football history, bar none, you play to that. I can't believe I'm so excited that kid's coming back. I've never seen anything like it, fellas.
As Wesley Walker said to us after the game, he doesn't miss. I was like, oh, boy.
No.
Well, now he's going to miss his first kick of the 2025 season, but
it's okay.
It's a long way from now.
Better than the last game of the year.
That's a great point. It's exciting that he's coming back. What a weapon for Michigan. Let's talk about our friends over at Prizepicks. It's the most fun way to enjoy watching sports. You can win up to 100 times your money this football season. You just select 2 or more players, pick more or less on their projected stats, and place your entry. It's a great way to test your skills as a fan. It's perfect to play this bowl season, which is now past, but you got the college football playoffs as well, NFL playoffs. Get some Lions picks in for Sunday Night Football. Detroit against Minnesota. Winner gets the number 1 seed in the NFC. And we have a special offer for you. Go to prizepicks.com or the Prizepicks app. Use the code Wolverine to receive a guaranteed $50 once you play $5 in lineups. Again, go to prizepicks.com or the Prizepicks app. Use the code Wolverine to receive a guaranteed $50 once you play $5 in lineups. I'll be playing again all weekend long NFL. Got the playoff semifinals next week, rolling right into the NFL. After that, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, football, wall to wall. Playing Prizepicks is the most fun way to watch all of those games. So thank you to Prizepicks, our sponsor. This was a good season as a one-off, I think, where and really even in your down years, you can't expect necessarily to beat Ohio State every single year. You're going to lose to them at times. Doesn't feel like it maybe right now, but you got to cherish those wins because there were decades where those were few and far between. But you want to get back in the playoff, you want to compete for the Big Ten. But as you said earlier, Anthony, in a transition season to win those big games, to still get to 8 wins. I know there were a bunch of disappointing losses along the way, especially all the games on the road, that they lost before beating Ohio State in Columbus. But you knocked off some blue bloods. I mean, I don't know that anyone's ever beaten USC, Ohio State, and Alabama in the same season. You kept your trophies in-house. There's still a lot to hang your hat on. And when you go from 5-5 to 8-5, the way they were able to keep it together, we talked to Max Bredesen, Chris and I, after the game about this, and I asked him, because it's the age-old question, right? Does culture create good winning? Or if you're winning, it's probably easy to keep that culture going. But when you're losing, when you come home from Indiana and lose for just the second time against that team since 1980, and you're getting all sorts of, you turn on social media, I can't imagine what those kids were thinking. But you come home, you have a bye, you keep it together, and you're able to win your last 3 games, including 2 over top 11 opponents. And Max Bredesen said culture is even more important when when the chips are down, as opposed to when you're winning, because you can feel it bend a little bit sometimes, but when it comes back and you can still go on to keep your standard, then I think that deserves to be praised. That you didn't have all the talent in the world this year, but they did not lay down at any point this season.
And I wrote this after the game. It's like a Lloyd Carr team when things would go south. His ability to get this team back on track and understand that it's, you know what, we still have games to play. We may not have everything to play for like we wanted to, but you're still playing for the name on the jersey and the winged helmet. That is remarkable. And what they were able to accomplish, guys, after losing to Indiana, they played well in that second half, especially defensively. But what they were able to do in those last 3 games is a testament. That's good coaching. And so if I said in the beginning of the year that it didn't look like a well-coached team, and I stick by that. There were times that it just didn't, flat out, whether it was position coaches, whether it was head coach, whether it was everything, all of it. It didn't look good. And at the end of the year, it looked like a well-coached football team. And some people will say, well, that's just because guys were playing better. No, that's not it at all. You had guys playing together. You had guys improving at every position, especially defensively. Not necessarily offensively, but especially defensively on that side of the ball. But you had guys playing hard. You had guys fighting their ass off, right? In all of these games. That Ohio State game, there was so much hitting. That Alabama game was a damn hard hitting game. You could hear it down there at the end of the game, fellas, when we were down there, how much they were into it. And to me, that is a great sign going forward. I still think there are some things they need to improve on. A couple of positions that I'll be watching, but I feel a lot better about things going forward with an inexperienced coach in Sherrone Moore, who I think I learned a lot, learned a lot on the job this year than I did maybe at the midway point of the season, thinking, man, he's gonna, this is a big job for a guy who's never been a head coach before. But for them to rally like they did is a testament to him and his coaching staff, especially those guys on defense.
Yeah, I think it goes back to sort of doubling down on the mentality that, when there is a setback, instead of exclaiming that the sky is falling and that you're planting a flag on how the era will unfold one way or another, I think it really just goes back to when you have something that doesn't go your way, the only thing that matters after that is what comes next. And, there were points this season where the criticisms were extremely warranted. And I know that there's talk, Wink Martindale kept all the receipts. He knows who said what, and that's fine. Deep down, those guys know that they didn't do a good enough job early in the year. I think that a lot of the players know that and feel that way as well. For them to kind of keep their business in-house and not really worry about what anyone said and just keep working, keep playing, get better at football. It's really all that they could do. To kind of keep everyone intact. And, I wrote at one point this year, and I've already sort of, eaten crow for this, that, this isn't the place to win on the job or to learn on the job. Certainly you want to win on the job. But maybe it is, when you apply those lessons and you apply, there is no greater teacher than defeat or failure. And I saw a quote that stuck with me a little while ago that said, the best people in any profession have a bigger list of failures in their life and their career than most other people do, because you take chances, you learn from them. You're always getting better. You don't lament the things that went wrong. And, when you kind of zoom out now, you look at what this year was, to get to 8 wins. And we sort of talked about all this earlier, but to get to 8 wins, 2-0 against your rivals, you win a bowl game. You sort of, you sign the recruiting class they did with the quarterback that they did. You've got some good things going on with NIL and in the portal. All you were looking for this year, I think, there was an outside shot they could compete for a spot in the playoff, but I think you just wanted to come out of this season feeling like there was hope for the future. I think there's a scenario in play where, maybe they do a little bit better, but we don't learn as much. And maybe there's that slow kind of tapering off, sort of like Stanford after Jim Harbaugh. But to kind of go through all of that adversity at once and go to a really dark place. I think coming off that Illinois game, I do think that morale was pretty darn low. To kind of pull yourself out of that dark place, finish on a high note. It's not a 1-to-1 comparison, but kind of reminds me of the early sort of Dan Campbell days with the Lions, where you went through some stuff, but you survived it, you stuck together, and you kept to the process, and you won some games and set yourself up for the future. So I look no further than maybe the team just down the road in terms of, hey, if you can survive all this and still get out of a season with a win over Ohio State, a win over Alabama, you're only going to get better from here. And that's incredibly encouraging. So I don't know what the future holds. I posted on the board last night, like, would you take a Marcus Freeman-like trajectory out of Sherrone Moore, where, 8-9 wins first year, get to 10 wins in that second year, and you're, in the college football playoff semifinal by year 3? I think I would. And not saying one guy is better than the other. I actually think that Sherrone Moore might be a little bit better of a head coach. But at the end of the day, it's all about that process and setting yourself up for long-term success. And I think that they've done that.
And like you said, there's a scenario maybe where we don't learn as much about this team and they do a little bit better. There's a scenario where they do a little bit better and they don't create as much urgency on the NIL pay-for-play front either. I mean, Sherrone Moore was asked this by Rainer Saban from the Detroit Free Press on signing day, that do you think you would have had as much support NIL-wise if you didn't have some of the early season losses? And he deflected the question as he should have and has the right to do. But I mean, it's hard to argue that you wouldn't have without some of those losses. So, and maybe that's the nature of this era of college football. And maybe let's see how Alabama rebounds. They pulled in a great recruiting class as always. But, when the teams don't have quite the season that they want, then it creates a little more urgency because you do need that support. Of course, revenue sharing is coming. That's going to help, kind of steady things as well. But there's certainly a case to be made that maybe you needed some of that to wake some people up that had only lost one game over the last 2 years and won the national championship. So that's, I think, an element to this as well, which makes it a productive year, even though you didn't have all the success that you wanted on the field. Should we talk about hoops?
Real quick, let's wrap this thing up.
Let's talk about our friends over at Gametime. They are the exclusive ticketing partner of the Wolverine podcast. It's the easiest way to get tickets to the biggest games, concerts, or shows. App is super easy to use. If you want to go to the Detroit Lions versus Minnesota Vikings game on Sunday Night Football, again, spot in the number 1 seed in the NFC on the line, you can get in right now, standing room only, cheapest ticket, $347. It is a hot ticket, but you want to get in on Gametime, and it's an expensive ticket, but if you use the code ON3, you can get $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. So really the only place to get your tickets. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, use the code ON3 for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem the code ON3. That's ON in the numeral 3 for $20 off. Terms apply. Download Gametime today. What time is it? Gametime. It's also going to be Gametime on Saturday for Michigan at USC. They'll play Tuesday, stay out west in Los Angeles, and play UCLA late on Tuesday night, 10 p.m. tip. Prepare yourselves for that. But I think the way this is laid out is perfectly. You have these 2 games during Christmas break. So you don't have classes. You don't have to worry about that. You go out there for 2. You also, you stay in between. You have some time to do some team building. They don't have online class or anything they have to worry about on that front. And you get USC first, a much more manageable opponent, before you face really one of the best teams in the country in UCLA that just knocked off Gonzaga. So I like the way this sets up kind of where it is in the season, how, even the order of these 2 games with USC, which will not have Terrence Williams II, unfortunately, and then UCLA on Tuesday night. A huge game that could tell us a lot about what this Big Ten race is going to look like.
USC, Terrence hurt?
Yeah, he had wrist surgery.
Okay. Well, best to him. He's a great kid. Yeah, I agree. And it's never easy when you travel halfway across the country to play. I don't care what anybody says. So you got to get that first one. I guess it'd kind of be gravy to beat UCLA on the road, right? If you win that first game, because it's so hard to win on the road anyway, let alone against a really good basketball team. But I can't wait to see that game and the tempo. And, it's going to be fun. Every time I get a chance to watch this Michigan team play, I appreciate it because I love the way Dusty made teams play, with the exception of all the turnovers. But again, they get that thing to 15 or so. John Beeline teams were what, at 11 or something like that when they're in their best years, 10. So when you're playing that tempo, that's not realistic. So as long as they don't give up the pick sixes and the sloppy turnovers, then I think they're going to be fine. So, but we'll see what happens. I think they handle USC. I think UCLA, they give them a hell of a game. If they come out of that 2-0, guys, I think they're one of the favorites to win the Big Ten.
I'd agree with that. Get this one on Saturday. Get that first win of the new year under your belt. I like where they're at right now. I do. With that game that they played on Sunday, you're now a top 25 offense on KenPom. You're in, that top 12, top 13 on defense. That's right where you want to be in the mix of those teams that can kind of compete and potentially win a national title. So a lot of basketball still to be played to determine if that's the case for them. You got to, obviously their issues are known at this point with the turnovers, but they can just clean that up and keep it to a respectable amount. They're going to be in this mix wire to wire for a Big Ten title. And I don't know if you guys saw what Illinois did at Oregon last night. That's probably the team to beat in this conference right now, but it's going to be fun. I think this is it's a pretty deep Big Ten. I think it's a very competitive Big Ten, especially in that top half. And, you got a chance now to go out to LA and kind of make a statement against these two schools that are in the Big Ten for the first time. So I think you come out of LA 1-1, regardless of what it looks like. That's a pretty good spot to be in for them.
Yeah, and Chris, you said they come out as one of the favorites if they go 2-0. They go into this trip the favorite to win the Big Ten at plus 390. UCLA after them, Michigan State, Illinois, Purdue, Maryland, Oregon. So you're looking at a really good opportunity here. Even if you do lose that game at UCLA, like you said, I mean, what do you want to probably split your road games, and you already have one of them under your belt, a huge one at Wisconsin already. So that's big. And now it's less about, okay, how is this team resume wise? What are they in the net? And of course you look at all that and calculate it, but it's a Big Ten race now that Michigan has a chance to win. And as Dusty May said before, the Bobby Knight in him, it's like you want to win the Big Ten as much as anything. And once you can do that, you prove to yourself that you can have success in the NCAA tournament. John Beeline was the exact same way in terms of importance. The Big Ten regular season title is as important as of a Big Ten or of a conference regular season race as there is in the country. It's always like the Big East tournament is kind of the thing out there. Here, it's the Big Ten regular season. Michigan hasn't won one in really quite a while. Their last couple of Big Ten titles were tournament titles, so they got a good chance heading in here. I think it sets up pretty nicely. That UCLA game is going to be a big challenge. I'm sure we'll talk about it on Monday, but that's going to be our show for this this Friday, actually. Morning. Happy New Year, everybody. Make sure to like the video if you're watching on YouTube. Subscribe to our channel. Head to thewolverine.com. Use the promo code UM1 for 2 months of premium access for just $1. Football season in the books. Basketball season kicking into high gear. Excited to cover it here at thewolverine.com, and we'll see everyone next time.